And welcome everybody. Could you put my slides up, please? If that's possible. And could you go to the next one? Thank you very much. So I'm going to begin by discussing why the EU introduced its excise regime, its common minimum excise regime. I'm then going to go on to talk about the directive on tobacco, and I'm going to talk about the experience of some of the other countries that have accessed the EU and their experience of joining, and what happened to them when they had to meet one of the provisions of the directive. I'm going to finish with perhaps what's going on now, which is a debate about within the EU as to how you should deal with excise taxation on e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products. So that's live, and that's kind of now what people are talking about. So if I could perhaps start with why did the EU want to, why do they want to have a uniform excise duty regime? Why did they want, what products was it levied on? So the products it's levied on, you can see down the left-hand side if you can read English. It's alcohols, and by that we mean beer, wine and spirits. It's manufactured tobacco products, cigarettes, cigars, cigarillos and other smoking products, and it's a variety of energy products. Why did it seek to implement a sort of duty regime? Well, that is because it wanted to harmonise the structures so as not to distort competition between countries or products as to whether excise duty or whether they should make choices about the products that they choose or import different countries' products depending on the excise duty rate. Now there's big questions as to whether they've actually achieved that, as in there's lots of people in the alcohol industry that complain about the fact that the tax on the excise duty on their drink is on the alcohol in their excise duty on their drink is different from that in other drinks. So typically you'd find people in the spirits industry complaining about how much excise duty the alcohol in the drink is charged on relative to that in beer and to a lesser extent wine. So you'll find that, but I doubt anyone goes into a bar or makes their choice as to what they're going to drink based on the excise duty. But potentially you might think that where's the highest excise duty, and how can I pay less excise duty? The sort of perhaps more interesting is the issue of sort of tobacco, whether people downtrade out of sort of manufactured cigarettes into sort of roll your own type tobacco, because of price differentials that reflect excise differentials. So what we have in the EU is basically minimum provisions across the excise duty. They are there to make sure that the internal market functions. They are there to make sure the taxes are neutral, i.e. people do not make choices as to what product they're buying and where they're buying from based on the excise duty rate. That's the aim anyway. So turning my attention to tobacco products. So the EU directive on tobacco is basically a minimum directive. So you have to be compliant. It's not a maximum directive. It's not an average directive. It is what you must be above these standards, and some of them are more biting than others. It grew out of the fact that when the EU got set up, different countries had a different preference for ad valorem versus specific taxation. So they had to come to some kind of compromise. And the compromise was that you have to have both parts of your tax, both a specific part and an ad valorem part to cigarette taxation. Over time, most countries, not all, Italy possibly being a slight exception, or at least being quite sluggish in its movement, most countries have increased their reliance on the specific component and decreased their reliance on the ad valorem component. But perhaps the most, the specific component, just to explain, is a certain proportion across all cigarettes. It's a fixed amount charged in euros, and that you must be above that minimum that they charge. The ad valorem is expressed as a percentage of the retail selling price. So you must also be above the retail selling price, but that is set in a percentage terms, and therefore is more specific to the economy. The big issue about accession is that the specific you must have a minimum excise charge of 90 euros per 1,000 cigarettes. Now, to give an indication of where Moldova is now, they're currently about 36 euros per 1,000 cigarettes. So by the time that they want to make their adjustment, in 2025, it's obviously got to go up by 54 euros. Just here doing some quick maths. So if I could turn to the next slide, if that's possible. So as I said, Moldova has decided in 2014 that it wants to meet the minimum of 90 euros per cigarettes. And that's going to have quite a large impact on how much excise duties are going to have to rise. So you can see in the chart that between 2010 and 2014, excise duties in Moldova on cigarettes went up by about 1.8 euros each year. In the last, from 2015 to 2020, they've gone up by about 4 euros a year. But to get to this target of 90, they're going to have to go up by 10.8 euros each year. Now, that's going to have a very large impact on the affordability of cigarettes within Moldova. So currently, on average, for most people, a packet of cigarettes is about 18% of the average person's disposable income. That's relatively high relative to some of the other countries. So, for example, Romania is at about 17%, Serbia and Poland at about 15%, Russia and Lithuania at 11%, Belarus at 10%, and Germany and Greece at about 9%. But it's quite high. But it's quite high at the moment. But if they're going to increase it by 10 euros each year, you're going to see a very large decline in the affordability of cigarettes. Now, some people might think that's a good thing, particularly if they're with the health lobby, but it will come with some negative side effects if you put up excise duty and you put up price to this time scale. Firstly, I think you will see it incentivize cross-border movement. So people will go across the borders to purchase lower price cigarettes. So, for example, the Eurasian Economic Union has a much lower target in excise rates. So cigarettes will be cheaper there. It will also incentivize the growth of the illicit market. Now, both those things are a negative for the Moldovan Treasury, the Moldovan Ministry of Finance, because at the moment, cigarettes and tobacco more generally is providing quite a lot of revenue. So in 2019, 7% of the state budget in Moldova came from tobacco. Looking at excise duty in total, 32% of excise duty came from tobacco. So what we might see, what's important is that Moldova doesn't undermine those revenues that are coming to the government with the hope of getting to this 90% target that it's self-imposed. Moldova does have the option of delaying that speed of adjustment. So there is you can delay that or get there more slowly, and that to my mind would be probably a sensible option. Could I go to the next slide? I've spoken about the impact of very rapid adjustment to meet the 90 euros minimum excise duty on cigarettes, and some of the accession countries here you can see the impact that joining the EU had on their cigarette markets. And I always think it's very interesting to look at the impact or how quickly some of the accession countries were forced to get to this minimum relative to some of the countries that had been a member for such a long time. So in this slide, we have divided some of the newer members of the EU, Latvia, Lithuania, Bulgaria, and Romania, versus some of the older members, Spain, Greece, and Portugal. Now, the ones on the left were given a very short time period to get to the 90 euros minimum. The ones on the right have had a very long time period. So they've taken, the ones on the right, Spain, Greece, and Portugal, have taken much longer, therefore had much lower increases in excise duty. Now, what does that mean? I think that means for me, and you can see in the impact on the illicit market, if you increase your excise duties very rapidly to get to this 90% minimum threshold, you will see a lot of distortion in your cigarette market. You will probably see the growth of the illicit market, and you will probably see the growth of cross-border shopping. I think some of the longer members have been very fortunate in the fact that because they've taken much lower time to get there and increased their excise duties much less rapidly, their illicit markets have grown much slower, if grown at all. So it's kind of interesting, and I think probably unfair from my perspective that some of the more long-term members have had so much time to get to the 90 euros threshold, whereas some of the accession countries have been forced to get there very rapidly, and that's had a very negative impact on the sort of the scale of the illicit market in cigarettes, and I'm sure cross-border shopping too. Could we go to the next slide, please? One of the big issues that the EU is debating at the moment is what are called novel tobacco products. Now, at the moment, and that for me means e-cigarettes, heated tobacco products, and there's obviously a lot of debate about are they good relative to cigarettes, in terms of health terms. They're new, they're developing all the time. New products are coming online. So what you see at the moment is that some countries within the EU do tax them, do levy excise duty on them, and others don't. And there's also there's large differences in the way that those, what is the tax base? What part of an e-cigarette should you be taxing? So recently, this year in 2020, the member states have gone to the Commission and asked for a sustained. They've asked them to review the treatment of e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products, whether they should be included in the directive, whether there should be a uniform minimum excise rate. And if so, what should that be levied on? There is, as lots of these products are very new, the debate is still sort of very much ongoing and live. So you could, and there are different views. There is no great consensus across a number of aspects. So perhaps some of the easiest ones to pick on are obviously the health benefits. Are e-cigarettes and are heated tobacco products less risky than normal tobacco products, cigarettes, cigarillos, cigars, etc.? Do they help people leave or sort of cease smoking, or are they a sort of what's called a gateway? Do lots of youngsters start with e-cigarettes and then move on to tobacco, move on to the real thing? So there is a debate over that, and there's no consensus, and I'm sure it's different for different people. But at the moment, we have lots of different member states applying different rules, charging different amounts, and some of them don't charge anything at all. So the countries have gone to the European Commission and asked them to form a view. It's hoped that they will take a holistic approach and very much go through go through those issues about the health benefits, about whether it's a gateway, whether it helps people come off tobacco. So there's a large debate. If you ask me, my company are a great fan of specific taxation rather than ad valorem. So if you ask me, we would vote for specific taxes rather than an ad valorem approach. We would vote for lower taxation than is applicable on manufactured cigarettes. That in the belief that these products help people come off tobacco, so there's less of a health risk. So it's helpful to people when they try to cease tobacco. And we'd also vote for them to be implemented over a long time period. That's again about sort of illicit market and cross-border shopping type exercises. So I've hoped I have shown you that rapid convergence with the 90% threshold has caused lots of disturbance in EU countries, or those countries wanting to join the EU cigarette markets. And I hope I've shown you there is an intense debate, and let's hope the debate plays out in full about e-cigarettes, about heated tobacco products, and what the EU is going to decide about that. So at that point, I'll stop and hand back to Danielle.